guys, so in this video I wanted to give you my number one deadlift technique tip, which is going to be essentially the importance of staying patient off the floor, of staying patient off the floor and pulling the slack out of the barbell and not freaking out when the deadlift doesn't move as fast as it possibly could off the floor. And this is something that especially sumo pullers have to deal with because sumo deadlifters tend to, because of this wide stance, you have to do a little bit more force to put into the barbell. It takes a little bit longer to break that inertia off the floor to get the barbell going. And sometimes people who are a little bit less experienced and don't really know what they're doing with the deadlift tend to freak out and compromise their position off the floor, and they don't tension themselves into the barbell properly to compromise their position off the floor so it moves faster, and that compromises another part of the lift. And the reason why it's so important to make sure that you stay patient off the floor and pull the slack out of the barbell and that you do have a good slack pull is because if you don't have that good positioning off the floor, because the deadlift, the most important part of it is how you're positioning yourself off the floor, because deadlift is all about leveraging yourself behind / against the barbell properly so then you can actually be in a good position at your lockouts. Because the reality is if you are not strong off the floor or you're not keeping that good position, when you get to a hard sticking points later on, it's going to be even harder to break through. So I want to just use a couple examples of me doing conventional and sumo deadlift of the patience off the floor and kind of like what I'm thinking about doing with my lats and with my legs. So first off, you can kind of see right here, I go down here, you can see right here. So I'm going to play that back even slower. So what I'm doing essentially is when I am hinged, so first off, what I'm doing as soon as I grip the barbell, you can see how I bring my hips down and back. So that's called a hip hinge. The reason why I will hinge at my hips is because I want to be able to create a leverage against the bar. What that's doing is that's creating a really, really great angle of my back and my hips to be able to produce force and take tension out of the barbell. The second thing that I'm doing, if you look at it, is I'm going to be pulling up on the barbell slowly, and by depressing my shoulders, just going to be pulling them back down, kind of more towards like my back pocket, hinging at the hips, and applying a ton of pressure into the barbell. As soon as I do that, and you can see how I have all this tension built up right here, like the barbell's already kind of going off the floor a tiny little bit. If you look down here, but not quite. I'm pulling out all this tension and all this slack. As soon as that happens, I'm going to think about basically pushing hard off the floor. But you can see right here, because I put in a ton of tension into the barbell properly, I'm in a really great position to be able to pull from and be able to have a really, really strong lockout. Because if people are struggling at lockout, it typically has to do with how they are positioning themselves off of the floor. You can kind of see how I'm in that really great spot as soon as I get the barbell moving off the floor and I get it to above my knees, I'm able to push through with my hips, and the top part of the sumo deadlift becomes pretty decently easy because your hips are just so close to the barbell at that point. If I was to start off more rounded and not be patient off the floor with my tensioning, and you can see how I do this on every single rep, I would lose a lot of my good positioning, and I would have a really hard time at lockouts. Now myself, I have more of a higher hip starting spot on sumo, and that's mainly just because of how I'm built and muscular strengths and whatnot. It's going to depend on yourself. My advice to people who are trying to find a starting hip position is to slowly lower down the weight after they get to a lockout with a slow eccentric, see where their hips are at. You kind of feel that out, but also more importantly, doing this hip hinge before you get to the barbell, putting in a ton of tension into the barbell, being patient off the floor. And as soon as you feel all that tension built up, then you push off the floor and whatnot. And you can kind of see how I'm able to lock it out and have a strong lockout as soon as that happens. One other point I want to have is that my stance width is where basically I'm stacked. I have the stacked joints. And the reason why you want to have stacked joints is because that lines up the pennation angles of the muscle fibers to produce the most force they possibly can. If you have joints that are not stacked, it essentially turns into a power leak. So my biggest cues on, how do you know like what stance width that you should do? It should basically be with experimentation, but ideally you want to have the point where when you produce force and you push into the barbell, you can keep your joints stacked at a proper angle where they're still on top of each other. And my biggest cues with sumo deadlift for people who with generating that good tension and not losing that position off the floor is to keep the knees out, push down and out in the direction of your toes, and then think of having a good hip hinge to the barbell, and then pull your shoulders down and back. You can see right here, I want to go right here. I'm keeping my arms really, really long. That's going to help make the barbell move in a more straight up and down motion, reduce the range of motion, and also keep me in a stronger position to lock out from. You can kind of see right there that I'm in a really great spot. I don't have to externally rotate my shoulders at the top because I've already done that on my setup. You can see again right here. Before I pull, I'll pull my arms down and back. A really good cue that I use is thinking of pulling my arms back into my back pockets, or I'm going to be thinking of protecting my armpits. So that's essentially what I want to go over with sumo deadlift. Now I want to give an example of this with conventional. So this is a deficit, but you can see how I'm really patient off the floor. Again, I'm applying a ton of pressure into the floor with my legs, keeping my hip hinge set, and I am making sure that I am patient off of the floor and not compromising that proper position. You can see right here, I'm doing the exact same thing on conventional deadlift. Depressing my arms, keeping them long, putting lots of tension into the barbell with my legs, and I'm not freaking out when the barbell doesn't move off the floor immediately. Again, don't lose that good starting spot. If you lose that good starting spot, you're going to be pulled out of position. And again, you can see right here, I want to actually, let me just 1 second. I'm going to slow that part down so you can really see how I do it. So when I go right here, I go down to the barbell. This pull upcoming is a really, really good example of how to do this. So I come down, set my grip. You can see right here how my shoulders are internally rotated. They're more protracted of a position of my shoulders. I'm going to do right here is I'm going to think about pulling my lats back, depressing them, pulling them back down towards my scapulas, coming towards my hips, my back pockets. And then what I'm going to do, as soon as that's done, again, right there, that's right, I do it. External rotation in my lats. I have my arms nice and long and depressed. And then I'm going to put in a ton of leg drive into the floor from that spot and brace really, really hard. I've already set my hip hinge, you can see right here. And the weight kind of just moves off the floor. I'm in a really, really great position to lock out. On conventional deadlift, it's going to feel easier off the floor usually, and your sticking point is going to be about right below the knee / above it. Will feel pretty sticky. That's why, again, like, don't sacrifice that position off the floor with your deadlift, because you can see right here, because my torso is at a great angle at lockout, I'm able to put my hips through faster. So I'm going to show you guys also in this next clip an example of what that shoulder depression kind of looks like when you do it properly with your lats, with helping take tension out of the floor. But basically just think about lats down, shoulders, basically protect the armpits, external rotation in those shoulders, keep your arms long, and then you want to apply tension into the barbell down in the direction of wherever your feet are pointing. And then brace really, really, really hard. Use that hip hinge to the barbell after as well by kind of hinging at your hips, which is going to be just bending them back to create a straight line, maintaining the distance between your shoulders and your hips on the deadlift. It's kind of what I like to think about doing when I am hinging, and not having like a anterior tilt in my pelvis to where it's kind of tucked under.
good.
Okay, so I wanted to film this clip just to kind of show you what it looks like if you do it right. So basically, what most people will do if they are internally rotating out their shoulders and they don't take the slide down the bar, when they go down to the barbell, they just kind of go like this, and you can kind of see, how that looks on my back here. Now, what it kind of feels like is like a lat spread, like a bodybuilder, when you do it properly. So you're going to go down and out like this with your shoulders, and kind of, it's the same thing if you're doing a lat spread. You wouldn't go like this, internally rotate. You want to depress and lower your scapula to go out like that. So a really good tool I like to use for lifters is who have a hard time feeling this external rotation in their deadlift and kind of start always pronated over like this, is a lat pull up. It's a lat pullover. Is basically that's training this movement, is you want to have that movement in your deadlift. So hopefully you guys can also do it. So this is just how most people will do it. Let's just do that. You won't actually depress and externally rotate their shoulders. We'll just go down with the barbell like this. There's no tension. What you want to do is pull it back and down like you're doing a lat spread, kind of like that.
Let's go.
Nice lockdown.
Oh, yeah.